Soon as the circle. Friends, welcome. Lee Hinson-Hasty here on my show, Broing Out with my friends. Leading theologically. That's the name apparently by some that I've heard. And I'm here with one of my favorite brothers, siblings in Christ and in the world, Rob Fohr. I can't say enough about the gift that you are to the world and the joy you bring my life, our family, to the church and the world. Thanks for making some time on your Wednesday to be with me and my guest.
It is great to be here, Lee.
And it looks like you're all set up in where you're working deployed from home in the home office. I see.
This is my home office. It's a subterranean in a bunker in the basement. No natural light whatsoever. It just allows me to focus in, lock in, and get some work done.
Well, it's great to have you and Christine here in Louisville. His wife, Christine Fohr, is the pastor head of staff at Harvey Brown Memorial Presbyterian Church. Rob and I met just a few years ago. You've been with the National Church 15 years. That's amazing to think. We met in an interview, and everybody on the interview team said, hire him. And they were right, because he brings so many gifts to the church. Worked in the national level as the chief staff person with HH-wide goal of helping the church connect with young adults. You've also been manager of organizational planning and effectiveness of the mission agency. You've worked with me with the Committee on Theological Education. And now, how long with the Committee on Mission Responsibility through Investment?
Almost 7 years.
Almost.
October will be 7. Yeah.
Wow. Director of Faith-Based Investing and Corporate Engagement. Thank you for the work MRTI does, but especially thank you for what you do. Rob will put a bio in there, but he has been a media consultant and market research firm. He has a Master's of Arts in Religion from Louisville Seminary. He's an ordained ruling elder. Also a bachelor's degree from Abilene Christian College. What is Abilene Christian College's mascot?
They're the Wildcats. Not my favorite Wildcats, but maybe my second or third favorite Wildcats.
Arizona.
Arizona would be the first, yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah. So I put them number 1. So
Rob also was young adult volunteer in Argentina. He speaks, y'all, 5 languages. 5, sort of. Okay.
I would say 3 confidently.
3 confidently.
Okay. 2 others I can kind of get through, kind of get around it.
We're going to be talking about faith-based or responsible investing for our topic. We'd love to know if you're here, and so just do a shout out in the comments to let us know who you hear, where you're watching from today. That would be great. But as we get started, Rob, I always ask my guest the same question each time. I'm going to ask a little bit differently. Was macht dich lebendig? I can't pronounce that.
Was macht dich lebendig? Ja, es ist eine große Frage, ja. Nein.
Or wait. Should I ask this?
Con la vida, con mi vida, que es muy interesante, yo creo. Pero esta es una prueba que no estoy preparado para estas pruebas de idiomas extranjeros.
Gracias.
Yeah, I'm basically saying I wasn't prepared for this quiz. However, I should have been, because as Lee mentioned, he met me in an interview, that took place in July of 2008, I believe it was.
Right.
And this gave me a very, very important lesson in life. Like, be careful what you put on your resume,
right?
Because it may come out to bite you in certain ways. So they had on their interview team a person who was married to a native German speaker and spoke fluent German. And I listed in my resume that I was fluent in Spanish and French and competent in German and Portuguese or something. And they had a question set up for me to ask me a question in German.
That wasn't fair. It really wasn't. I just wanted to be public. I kind of wanted to come out publicly and say that wasn't fair.
Well, whatever. I guess I passed okay, but it was kind of
100%.
yeah, in all seriousness, Lee, I am so grateful to you because
Thank
I
you.
would not be here where I am right now without you. And
Oh gosh.
you took a
Yeah.
chance on a guy that didn't have the kind of normative background to come work for the church.
Well,
And it was just really one of the greatest gifts of my life to come work with you and work for the national staff.
well, it's not just a liturgical response, but I'll say also with you, Rob, 100%. Friends, if you do not speak German or Spanish or Portuguese or Italian, the question is, what is making you come alive? That's how Howard Thurman asked it, or Katie Cannon, very similarly, from Alice Walker. What is the work your soul must have? We'd love to hear, Rob. Especially these days, what is making you come alive? What is the work your soul must have?
Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciate the prompt. So for me, what really makes me come alive is I wouldn't have had this language until recently, I think, but it's really it's kind of three parts. It's navigating complexity and facilitating understanding between people and groups. That is enormously helpful as a parent as well, and then finding pathways forward. So those kind of three things: navigating complexity, facilitating understanding between people and groups, and finding pathways forward.
Those are great parenting skills as well. I should have mentioned the parent of two beautiful daughters, and it's true. I mean, and I'd say especially also for this particular moment in 2022, as we come through wherever we are in this pandemic. Let's hope we're coming through it. Things are different than they were 5 months ago, definitely 2 years ago, and there's generational shifts happening. I mean, things happening on the national stage clearly that are happening, and being able to navigate those complexities to help people understand. I mean, I think that you're somebody who does think deeply and theologically and politically, philosophically, economically. You have a lot of background, but for a purpose. I love to hear that, to find a pathway forward. And you're doing that just not alone, right? You're doing that with groups. I mean, now with the Committee on Mission and Responsibility through Investment.
Yeah. It's well, I appreciate you saying that, Lee. And it's been an interesting 7 years with MRTI. MRTI is the committee that is now in its 50th year, which is it's celebrating its 50th year. It was the original responsible investing policies were adopted by the Northern Stream of the Presbyterian Church in 1971. And the next year there was a committee established to kind of to implement those policies. And it really it's amazing that it's been 50 years, because the Presbyterian Church wasn't the only faith-based entity that was having these kind of this idea around that time, but it was a really revolutionary idea, which was and it was mostly, I would say, mainline Protestant denominations that were kind of having these conversations. But it was the idea that, okay, if we are a faith-based entity and we have invested capital through our pension fund, through our foundations, right, shouldn't we be trying to accomplish something other than just a good financial return? Should we try to be advancing some kind of mission-related goal? And the answer was yes to those denominations, and whatever their kind of deliberative body was. For us, the General Assembly. And in 1971, the General Assembly said, okay, here's what we want to advance through our invested capital. We want to advance, these are the mission goals we want to advance. The pursuit of peacemaking, the achievement of environmental responsibility, the achievement of economic justice and social justice, the achievement of racial justice, and the advancement of the rights of women, which was, again, in 1971, that was pretty huge. And it was this very simple idea, but it was revolutionary. Like, hey, we have this capital. Corporations, publicly traded corporations, have a lot of power, and they are, very they're strong institutions and actors in our society. And can we leverage our investments, which are significant? If you add up all the faith-based related capital, it's pretty big. The coalition that we work through of faith-based investors, the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, which the Presbyterian Church was a co-founder of 50 years ago.
Wow.
Now is a coalition of something like $2.4 trillion of assets under management. So
wait, say that again. 2.7 trillion.
2.4 trillion. Yeah.
Trillion.
And
Wow.
that's not, that coalition is not all faith-based investors, but it's faith and values-based investors. But it is, it's the leadership, the board are all predominantly faith-based. And
Wow.
so it's really a very again, very, very powerful thing. And since the 1970s, I mean, you can hear some of the first generation of those people engaged in that work are still around. They're like in their late 70s, early 80s. And they will say, like, we were some of the first investors that would come and talk to corporations about anything other than a financial return. Like, what are you doing to protect your fence line communities, to making sure that you're not, the operations from your company aren't damaging the environment around, where kids swim or,
Right.
play or whatever. And nobody was asking those questions, or very few people were asking those questions. And the religious related investors, faith-based investors, were the ones that really pioneered all that work. So
where was, a lot of folks know about socially responsible investing now. I mean, you can, with just about, any investment company, they have different screens set up, et cetera. Where was MRTI and the faith-based investment sort of movement? Were they on the leading edge of that as well?
Absolutely. So what's become known as ESG, or environmental, social, and governance investing, that was, I mean, the faith-based investors were really the leaders of all that, and we still really don't use that. We don't always use that framework. We prefer more like responsible investing, because it's a little bit different than ESG. I mean, it gets really granular about the differences, but there is a difference. Or some you say the word sustainable investing, but so like I said, the faith-based investors were really the only actors in the space for many, many years, or the primary actors in the space, along with some other, kind of, NGO type groups and whatnot. And unions were kind of, labor unions got involved, but it really has started to expand into, state pension funds, and as well as other, now it's, kind of really, I would say mainstream, and kind of along generational lines. The younger you go, it's just an expectation now that
Right.
that investors really want their investments to be responsibly
100%. I mean, it's to make an impact, not just voting against, but voting for. I mean, there's been a lot of going on there. Just because people don't really know, and I'm always learning about this. There's 4 or 5 committees of MRTI around these sort of areas that you work in. Climate change is one, I know. What else are you working on?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we have our committee is divided into 3 subcommittees that kind of focus on kind of particular work streams. So we've got one, our most active, lately, last 7 or 8 years, has been our environmental and climate change committee.
Mm-hmm.
And they focus a lot on, anything that has to do with greenhouse gas emissions and lowering those, and climate change related issues, but also on the environmental justice side. We work with on environmental racism. Like the idea that a company's operations are disproportionately affecting fence-like communities, which are disproportionately communities of color. Right. So they work on that. They work on safe chemicals. That kind of falls under their purview. And then we have a healthcare and human rights subcommittee, which
I bet that's getting active of late.
It's getting very active, especially with our reproductive health work, which again, the Presbyterian Church through MRTI was really one of the first faith-based investors to actively engage in this work, and that was in a newer coalition that was developed about 2-3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the Presbyterian Church, as one of, I'm sure maybe some of the listeners or consumers of this the show know, but was on the leading edge of faith-based organizations taking what you'd call pro reproductive health policies,
right,
reproductive rights. So it was just a natural fit for us to really engage this work. And that is, with the looming Supreme Court's decision in June, we think it's going to be a much bigger issue for our 2022-2023 program year. And then we also work on that on human rights, workers' rights, responsible supply chains, human rights in conflict-affected and high-risk areas, which was a major focus of MRTI's work. I'd say between 2004 and 2014 still is a major focus, but that was getting a lot of focus at the General Assembly. And then our third group is banks and financial institutions. Now, what's interesting about banks and financial institutions is that we focus mostly on climate-related issues, but specializing with banks and insurers.
Right. Well, it's huge industry, of course, and so helpful and clarifying. And I think a lot of folks don't really realize that these policies work through the General Assembly. You're going to be going to the General Assembly with some recommendations. We can talk about those. But also, I think just folks need to know that the Board of Pensions and the Presbyterian Foundation, where there are significant endowments held, both of those boards look at these recommendations, correct? And it becomes part of their work. Is how to just give us a thumbnail of that, how that works.
So the official company line is MRTI enjoys the full participation of the Board of Pensions and Presbyterian Foundation as much as legally allowed.
Right.
And that last point is really important. But so another thing about the Presbyterian Church in this space is that we are really uniquely organized. And really there, because, for a very Presbyterian reason, we have a committee that does this work. Right. And the General
elected by the General Assembly, by the way.
Yeah. All elected. So the General Assembly in its wisdom figured out a way to kind of build in this connectivity structurally to MRTI by saying, okay, we want representatives from 6 entities to be permanent members on MRTI. So we have 2 members from the boards of the Board of Pensions, 2 members from the Board of Pensions, 2 members from the boards of the Presbyterian Foundation and or the Newcomer Trust Company. We have 1 of each right now.
Right.
2 members from the Mission Agency, the Presbyterian Mission Agency board. And then we have a member from the Advocacy Committee on Women's Concerns, a member from the Racial Equity Advocacy Committee, and 1 from the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy. And then 3 committee members that are elected at large, that are elected directly by the General Assembly. But all of the members were elected by the General Assembly at one point.
Right.
So those 6 entities, which, as you know, sometimes have very different goals.
That's bringing people together, right?
Yeah. I mean,
all moving in various directions.
Yeah, and it really is it's really the special sauce, if you will, of MRTI, because it is, when everybody comes at it from using a different prism, from a different perspective, but each is really, really important. And when we come to our end product, I mean, it has gone through, just a lot of different kind of filters, if you will, from a racial justice perspective, a gender justice perspective, a financial perspective, a mission perspective, it's just really, really powerful. So MRTI has that. And so when we say, do the Board of Pensions and Foundation participate? The answer is yes. They're part of there is no we and they. It's we are they, So it's really, really a great thing. We've had great representatives from the boards of both investment agencies and really all the entities. And what gets a lot of attention at General Assembly around now is around divestment, which is kind of a strange thing for MRTI in some ways, because so much of what MRTI does is engagement, is trying to follow the policies of the General Assembly, which nowhere is there a goal of divestment. The goal is to move companies
That's helpful
towards alignment with the values as articulated by the General Assembly. So
that seems to be, that can be a guide to, I see our old friend, he's not old, David Stitt Bethune, who's a pastor. I mean, he's a leader in his presbytery, I know, as well. I mean, so pastors and ruling elders in their local churches, these are the kind of things they can use as guides as well, or working with the foundation or working with their own investment company. It can help them too, right? Before we get to the General Assembly thing, I just want to make sure
absolutely.
there's access to help people do this kind of responsible investing, or an individual, let's say, an individual says, hey, I want to take guidance from what my church's committee is saying about investing responsibly today. Is that possible?
I get this question all the time as you get inquiries from all over the church, and it's great. And so the answer is yes. So, so what I mentioned before, a lot of what MRTI does is kind of on behalf of the PCUSA. However, right. What you just mentioned is that there's also a helping individuals and congregations and Presbyterian-related entities do this work. And so MRTI produces two really important resources every year. One is the General Assembly divestment and prescription list, which shows a list of all the companies that are running afoul of General Assembly policies.
Right. So and that they can find that on your website, probably.
That's on the website. Yep. That's on the website. All this is on the webpage. We're a one-stop shop. So we produce that, and that gets renewed every in the fourth quarter of every year, and it goes into effect January 1st of the next year. The second is we make proxy voting guiding recommendations. So if you are an individual or you're on a investment committee of a church, that a congregation that has an endowment, and if you own a direct equity, so you own actually stock in a company, you can vote your shares. And it's really important to do that, because that shows that you're can vote your values, and MRTI provides guidance for that. And then thirdly, we're also available to help congregations, develop their own policies, their own social responsible investment policies. And we've done that by kind of going through all these policies that have been sent to us over the years. And we've kind of curated the ones we like and the ones that are most adaptable. And we say, okay, here's kind of a template, and you can kind of build from there.
That's beautiful. That's real service to church and investors and committees. And I'm sure, very much appreciated. And that is the kind of work that you always seem to do, is to be able to make these kind of things accessible and speak plainly. And I think it's really helpful. I'm not sure where you got that, but I'm glad you have got it. And you mentioned something sort of in passing a minute ago, I think we need to take note of, is this is 50 years of this work that's been going on. I mean, half a century, and that's huge. That's a huge sort of marker. I mean, coming into this next assembly, also with, I think, some huge wins. Can you talk about that? Some groups coming together that were not previously on the same page.
Very exciting. So since 2014,
not just a number to celebrate.
No. Since 2014, there has been grassroots organizing done by fossil-free PCUSA to organize presbyteries to advance an overture that basically was called for categorical divestment for the Board of Pensions and Foundation to divest all their holdings in oil and gas companies. And that was first discussed at the 2014 assembly, and it was referred to MRTI because MRTI is the mechanism to that kind of does this recommendation and advances these policies, implements these policies. So that was immediately before my time with the committee. But basically, what happened was there was MRTI did research and looked at all the existing policy on environmental related items, and came to find that there were some gaps. There was a gap that the most comprehensive environmental policy was passed in 2008, and it had everything that you could think of to do, what individuals need to do, what churches need to do, what kind of public policy we need to be advocating for, but it gave no guidance about owning stocks. Wow. So we had to come back and basically ask for guidance in 2016, and then basically get that guidance affirmed in a framework in 2018. So what's been happening in 16 and 18, where you had these groups, and Fossil Free has done an amazing job of advocacy and getting environmental issues in front of the General Assembly. And in fact, in 2022, it's the second assembly in a row where there's a standalone environmental issues committee, and that's a lot of credit to their good work. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of there's been this kind of false dichotomy of this group wants divestment, this group wants engagement, and that was because it was a complicated message for MRTI to say, actually, we just need more policy guidance before we can do divestment, because we've got a selected divestment policy which starts out heavy in engagement and then funnels into divestment recommendations, selected divestment recommendations, and that's done for two reasons. One is there's a social witness component to it by saying we're looking at the companies that are the laggards, that are not the most out of compliance with the General Assembly standards, and we're going to target those companies, and they have to then take some reputation risk potentially.
Right.
That's number one. Number two is the investing agencies can implement those recommendations and still be in compliance with their fiduciary duty. So we're really pleased to report that MRTI is recommending 5 companies. There were 9 companies that the General Assembly in 2018 said, we want you to do focused engagement with these companies, come back with possible selective divestment recommendations for companies that are not moving towards compliance.
Right.
And we're pleased to report that 4 of them actually are, at this point, moving towards compliance, which is basically trying to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement of keeping average global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. But there are 5, unfortunately, that while they have made some progress, it's not enough, not fast enough, far enough. So we're making those recommendations. And the leaders of fossil-free PCSA have publicly endorsed the MRTI report.
Amazing.
And what's also exciting is their overture, as long as it stays written pretty much the way it is now, could pass alongside the MRTI report.
Wow.
Because theirs is really more aspirational in nature, and MRTI's is like kind of the actual implementation, how this gets done.
Right.
So
that is amazing. I mean, this is what I mean. This is the kind of work you do, and this is what church is supposed to look like, don't you think, Rob? Where like we don't have to agree, but we keep working at it until we can figure out how we can be partners. I mean, that's church right there. Like,
and I say this all the time. I learned this from you. You taught me how to do that, how to work for the church, and this that's your North Star is what you just said, I think.
Well, it is. I mean, it is the thing. Yeah. So, I mean, I say that, but I mean, I see it in this, and it is worth celebrating. Anybody who's at, in any of the last few assemblies will know, like, wow. I mean, fossil fuel, fossil free, and MRTI coming together is really super exciting, and it also gives hope for other things that we're working on, whatever it might be. I mean, there's plenty, as one of my mentors used to tell me, when your day and your schedule gets thrown off because you get a curveball, like, you got ministry to do. Right. We got ministry to do. So our time is sort of waning, sadly. Friends, if you don't know Rob and MRTI, I hope you're getting to know. If you have questions, comments, we're happy to take them in these last few minutes. What a true gift you are to the church, Rob, and everything that you do. Rob is a swimmer, and he knows how to navigate lots of waters, and he helps find a pathway forward. That is for sure, and you're proving that. You can see he understands this in its complexity as well as in the big picture, and that's so important too. Just love. It's worth something to celebrate in the Presbyterian Church USA that we're at this leading edge of this work and continuing to be, not just in 1971, but here in 2022. And I'd love to hear, maybe as a last question, kind of what you see moving forward. You mentioned a little bit about the work in healthcare, et cetera, but what do you see sort of going forward? What should people be thinking about if they want to be investing responsibly? What would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, well, obviously keep abreast of MRTI's work, which is
right.
on our webpage.
Right.
So in the coming years, I mean, we're continuing to really focus in on trying to mitigate the worst effects of the climate crisis. So that's going to be working with not only with producers of fossil fuels, but also kind of heavy users like transportation, like airlines. We're working a lot with airlines to try to get them to move faster towards sustainable aviation fuels. We're working a lot. We had a really great engagement this last year with AIG, a major insurer.
Right.
And they are going to be making some serious commitments to go to net zero emissions in both their underwriting and their investing portfolios. Working with utility companies that they really can drive a lot of the progress with offering renewables for their customers. And then, as I mentioned before, I mean, I think access to reproductive health and reproductive issues are going to be really kind of on the front burner, so to speak, especially after what we expect the Supreme Court to do.
Right. Well, friends, keep following, and I'll keep talking about it here on Leading Theologically. Connect with Rob on the website. I put his bio there as well with ICCR. Remind me, that stands for
Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility.
Yeah, learn more about them. It's just a real gift to the church and the world. I'd love for you to give us a charge, a blessing. After I invite folks in 2 weeks, I'm actually going to see him next week in Montreat. I'm excited about that. David Lamont, singer-songwriter, activist. He'll be on the show talking about how change really happens. He's got a new book coming out this year along these lines. He also has a new, do we say CD or album? What do we say now when they drop music?
EP, LP, EP. I don't know.
He is doing vinyl this time, which is kind of cool. If you don't know about David, you can go to his website, davidlamont.com. But again, thanks, Rob, for being with us. And everybody is here. Great to see you, David Stip-Bethune, and everybody else. Stay safe. Rob, would you send us?
Sure. And a quick caveat here: my spouse Christine is the minister, so I don't know. I'm not good at giving benedictions, but I'll just say, we live in a really tough time. Like, these are tough times, and it is so important to name that and to to really try to sit there with that. My hope and my prayer is that that we find ways to come together, because it's just so easy to be to be divided, to be in your own camp, to be on your own team, and to really to really find ways to continue to work together. And this is another place where I think the Presbyterian Church, interestingly, through our process in our General Assembly at its core, can show the way for the broader culture of, it's not always pretty, but it's, we need to do this together. We're all in it together. So
amen. Hallelujah. Amen. Thank you, Rob. That's a beautiful message. We are in this together, and it's good to be together with you. Everyone, we'll see you in 2 weeks with David Lamont. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.